Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scary Stories We Tell. I am your host, Chris Tascio, and I am joined by one of the other hosts of this show, your friend and mine, from the Strange Beliefs podcast. How the fuck do I keep saying that? I'm going to stop that shit right now.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of SurrealTube here at Scary Stories We Tell. I am one of your hosts, Chris Tascio, and I am joined by the other host of this show, your friend and mine, Emma.
That would be me. Hello.
It is you, and this was your this idea was your idea. So I ain't even going to take credit for it. But on SurrealTube, we watch, talk about, and analyze surreal, strange things on the internet, not just necessarily YouTube, because guess what? Tube can be referring to the boob tube, which effectively all of our computers, TVs, more than likely your telephone, is now your TV anymore. But namely, right now, we are talking about a little series called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which you can find on YouTube and in the description of this podcast. Anything we talk about, I will be providing you the links if you would like to follow along with us. Emma, this specific, again, this show was your idea, but this specific show is the first one that you brought to this episode of Scary Stories We Tell. We talked about the first three on the last episode: creativity, time, and love. But
Yes.
if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the first episode, go and do that first. But if you're refusing to do that, if you want to be stubborn, Emma, tell the listeners what is Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Why are we talking about it?
So basically, I had this idea. I talked about this in our last episode, but just to touch on it super quick. During our one-on-one conversations that are, surprise, surprise, not recorded, I found out that Chris has never seen a good amount of these like creepy online, videos, viral videos that have gone around, story-driven online content, just all in this like creepy space that I feel like, especially Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is incredibly popular, which we also talked about in the last episode. And not that I'm here to shame you for not seeing things. God knows I've lived a sheltered life, and you could probably, name literally any 10 movies, and I can promise you I've probably never seen any of them. So it's a toss-up.
I mean, any more movies used to be a singular form of entertainment. I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, not so much in the 80s and 90s, but in the the 20s through the 60s, it was movies, and that's all anybody watched. I mean, there was TV, but movies were part of the common cultural zeitgeist of the day. Now with YouTube and everything else, there are plenty of things. There are more videos on YouTube than there will ever be movies that exist in the world. YouTube is as big a part of the conversation of what makes taste, what's culturally important, what's culturally significant. YouTube, like movies and TV, back 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, YouTube is an important part of the conversation. I realize that there are people older than me, maybe not even by more than 5 to 10 years, that look at YouTube as, it's just a place to post dumb videos. It's so much more than that. I mean, there's plenty of stupid shit on YouTube, but there's plenty of stupid fucking movies too. I mean, just because something has dumb aspects to it does not discredit or discount the medium as a whole. And I say that as, again, someone who was rather stubborn in his own right about giving into the amount of content on YouTube. But I will tell you, as someone who watches YouTube every day, the kind of content that I watch, it's not like this, but it is a lot of well-produced, well-edited, high-quality content that any television network would absolutely give their left arm for. And yet it's all on YouTube. All of it's on YouTube. So YouTube should be a place people go to watch things, whatever it is. I think anything, frankly. But for me, I think it's important to impress upon people, like, if you're not watching things on YouTube, there is stuff for you on YouTube. You just don't know it yet. But I promise you will find something to love on YouTube. It may not be Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, but there's plenty of non-strange, weird, surreal things to be had on YouTube.
Very true. And so I sort of thought that this series could be a way that I expand your knowledge of what's creepy online. And I also thought that it would be really fun to get some raw reactions, because some of this stuff can be relatively shocking, but also sometimes pretty funny. And I know that I get a kick out of watching a reaction. So I hope longtime listeners are also getting a kick out of it as well. So yeah.
Emma's just showing me the biggest videos on YouTube, because I think the first 3 videos combined have like 140 million views.
If not more.
It's not an insignificant amount. I mean, that's a massive amount of views. 30 million views, 20 million, a million views is a lot. But when you start going into the tens of millions, it's like, oh my Lord, you've really touched a nerve. And as we've kind of sat here for a while and I've been able to process Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared since we watched it last time, I'm not surprised it's been successful. I'm not surprised that it has gone on to be more than just a YouTube show. But at the same time, it's interesting because it does feel very a time and a place kind of comedy, but yet it still exists now in 2022. Like the first video came out 11 years ago. It's comedy,
still relevant. Yeah.
That comedy though, like that was very grounded in 2011. Like the kinds of things that I was watching in 2011, the kinds of things that existed in 2011, that was, a year removed, 2 years removed, 3 years, I guess, 3.5 years removed from me being in high school. This was the kind of thing I would have watched then. And so it's funny that it still is as interesting and funny as it was 10 years ago, maybe even more so now. Again, I don't have that benefit of having seen it a decade ago, so I don't know. I would ask you that, but it's funny because this kind of comedy, these kinds of things that they're drawing on, I would not have thought they would have been able to stay relevant almost a decade later. But the first 3 videos that we watched, I think still really hang together. I'm curious if the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th ones kind of keep that up. But you know what I mean? Like this kind of comedy, I'm surprised it has the same legs. But when you were watching the first 3 last time, did you feel like they had aged well? Were you getting more out of them as kind of more of an adult now than you maybe were when the first ones came out?
It definitely was not an adult when the first one came out.
Right. You were what, like 10, 11, something like that?
11 years ago. If I'm 25 now, you do the math. I'm too tired.
You're like 14?
Sick.
That's so you're like a teenager.
That I straight up refuse to do.
But you're a teenager. So, and again, like this kind of comedy would have appealed to a very early 20s Chris Stashew. But I think the thing about it that's funny, and again, we rewatched the 3rd video again before we started, it's not edgy. Do you know what I mean? It's funny and weird and strange and surreal without being edgy. And I feel like it's the lack of edginess that makes it more timeless than if they were really being edgy and,
Oh yeah, if they are edgy, they really pad it out with, the subversion of expectations. But it's interesting because you brought up, if I think it held up, if it, feels different to me now than it did back then. I will say that it capitalized on a lot of what came before it. The first thing that comes to mind is Charlie the Unicorn. Which was another massive. Please tell me you've watched that.
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay.
I was more. Let me put it this way: there were different things that I went to for like where they're drawing source material. So I kind of see what you're getting at.
I mean, vibe wise, the type of shock humor, the type of subverting expectations, it feels reminiscent of that era of YouTube content specifically.
Strange, and so for strange sake, I guess.
Yeah, like it's there to be shared. It's there to make your friends go, what the fuck? Right. Like that's what it felt like back then was, oh my God, check out this like really weird shit that I just found. Or like you send it to your friend and you're like, oh my God, check out this like really cute, wholesome video. And then they're like, what the fuck did you just send me?
Well, I was going to say like, this also reminds me of, and I don't remember if I mentioned on the first episode or not, this show, YouTube channel comes out like 2 years, a year after Avenue Q is done running on Broadway, which is another kind of like we're talking about subverting of the expectations. Avenue Q is R-rated Sesame Street, I think is the only way I could describe it for those of you that don't know what it is. There's a song in the musical that was on Broadway. It ran on Broadway for like almost a decade called The Internet is for Porn. and it's a song presented in the style of a Sesame Street song about how you can go on the internet and jerk off to porn. And there is a line in the song that says, grab your dick and double click for porn, porn, porn. But it's sung in that Sesame Street Muppetsy kind of way.
Yeah. And I also definitely see, as somebody who actually did see Avenue Q on Broadway, which it was phenomenal. I was relatively young when I saw it. You can thank my parents for letting me in. I literally
went like what, like what, 8 to 12?
No, I'm pretty sure I was like 14-ish. So I don't know where you got that it came out.
It came out
after it stopped running.
It ran from, I guess it ran on Broadway. Yeah, I think it ran on Broadway.
Oh, I think I caught it off Broadway, so it might have been a later running of it.
That's fair.
I think it was basically the same things, roughly the same cast. It was just that it was revived, I suppose, off Broadway. But yeah, it is very similar to that. I would say the one big difference is that where Avenue Q was tackling, like, you know, it's the adult version, as you said, the adult version of Sesame Street. It's as if, you know, an adult was writing Sesame Street for adults. Like, that is the whole purpose of Avenue Q.
Right.
Where to me, this is still really riding on those young themes, but shining a light on the darkness under it, like especially with love. I like that one. We actually just rewatched it to get back into the mode, and it's so funny to me, especially like when it was talking about like how they, you know, kid shows like market the idea of marriage to children and how it has to be this one very specific way, and how weird it sounds when you take it all out of context, you know, and like that's how a child hears it. And like it really shines a light on it for adults to take a different look at children's programming. Because
kids programming is all about love each other, and all we do is love each other. It kind of takes the piss out of it, which I appreciate. Obviously, like anything that takes the piss out is going to be funny. Like, but to your point, this isn't trying to be funny. You know, like
it's trying to make a point,
right? If it's, you know, Avenue Q was trying to be funny. You don't put grab your dick and double click and not expect people aren't going to laugh like hyenas. But I don't know. I feel like this is more, this is like proving a point, or kind of just cutting the legs out from underneath, I guess. Or you could even say being cynical about children's entertainment, which children's entertainment has so much optimism. Like, it deserves a heavy dose of cynicism. But again, we're also talking about kids. Like, you know, we're grown up kids. We all are adult. You know, kids become adults. So, you know, the cynicism comes with being adults, not with being kids.
So I feel like when I watched this when I was much younger, I think for me, it didn't hit home in that same way. To me, I was riding off of, you know, Charlie the Unicorn in that era of online entertainment. And I saw it in that same shock humor, wholesome until it's not, like something that's really like weird and strange and creepy, maybe scary, that's been like rebranded or reskinned to look fun and inviting, and everybody should click on this. And I think I didn't really think too hard about it back then. And obviously rewatching it now as an adult, very far removed from that type of content. I mean, YouTube has evolved for the most part. You know, I don't want to say past this type of content, but I do want to say that like we've moved into different, you know, areas of comedy. Not everything is Charlie the Unicorn.
Right.
We've definitely like expanded since then. I think the humor of the internet has grown and become so much more meta, where like Charlie the Unicorn was like super in your face about like what it was doing.
Weird for weird's sake. Like, there was no rhyme or reason to it.
They called it lol random humor. And that was very true of the time. And so I think when I first watched the first episode of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, I was watching it under that same lens of lol random, not, oh, this is actually like a commentary on something.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think I was the target audience for it to be a commentary on something. I think I was just part of the swarm of people that made it popular, which I'm glad. Obviously it deserved it. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to start with this series because it is so strong. It's so much illustrates my point of how these types of viral videos are more than just for clicks, more than just shock factor. And that's why I like having the time afterwards to like go through and analyze and try to see, like, do we think there is a deeper meaning, and what is that deeper meaning after the whole like reaction and shock and all of that. So that being said, do you want to watch episode 4?
Let's do it. I've been waiting how long? And so in podcasting time, we're probably a couple episodes removed from the last time we did this. But in real time, it's been almost a month.
I was going to say about a month.
It's been almost a month since I watched.
And you have been holding back.
I have not. I watched those 3 with you. We recorded that evening and watched them. And then either the same evening or the next evening, I was on gaming with a friend of mine and I showed him all 3. And he was like, are there more? And I was like, there are, but I can't show you yet. So now after this, I'll be able to show him. So yeah, I've been kind of waiting with bated breath to see the next, I don't know, 100 million views worth of videos, because they kind of drop off in the 6th one, but the 4th video has 34 million views. So
yeah, what I will say is that the stars have aligned for us to meet once more. I am really excited because I have not watched these last 3 in a very long time. And what I'm really excited for after that is for us to potentially get into watching the new TV series, which is what this is all sort of leading up to. If we're still interested in doing so, if we can find a way to, watch a 22-minute episode without showing you guys a 22-minute episode.
We'll have to, yeah. We'll have to.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, it will probably be less a live watching episode because this kind of necessitates it this way, but it'll probably be more of a maybe watch it. Yeah, I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
But even my boyfriend is like, oh, this series came out. We should watch it together. And I'm like, babe, I'm sorry. This one's reserved for Chris.
See, just shut. I had to shut someone down. You had to shut someone down. Now we're here. I'm assuming it's this one, right?
Yes, that would be it.
So like I did last time, this is Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 4. This was posted 7 years ago, March 31st, 2015. What a different time.
Day after my birthday.
Yeah, well, Jesus Christ. What would you go back in time and tell Emma in 7 years ago? Gotcha.
Oh, that's a toughie. I mean, this podcast isn't my therapist, so maybe not that question.
I don't even know, like 2015, March of 2015, we would have only been living in Nebraska for less than a year. So I couldn't even tell you what I was doing. I wasn't watching this. I'll tell you that much. That's not what I was doing, but that's what we're doing now. So 34 million views can't be wrong. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Number 4, 5 minutes and 1 second.
Oh, I guess it's my turn to choose a card.
We'll be right back after watching the 4th episode of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared on YouTube.
Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
I think what's interesting for me about that last one is so it's 5 minutes long, and the other ones that was 6 minutes. I want to say the other 2 were probably in the same ballpark of 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, I think the first one was shorter.
Yeah, the first one. So the first one and the second one were 3.5 minutes. I think the longer the video goes on, the less effective it is. And I think that this video, similarly to the last one, it kind of lets the joke go on a little too long. Like the joke that they're in the computer and they're dancing around. Like I get what they're driving at. Like the monotony of being on a computer. And I mean, being on a computer, there really is kind of only really two things you can do: work or not work on a computer, really.
Work or gain entertainment.
Right. And so I kind of like that they're like kind of playing off of the binariness of computers, but it feels like I don't know. It feels just a little long. Like the joke that they're making, the joke that they're making,
quite repetitive.
Yeah. And again, I get what they're getting at because the monotonous, repetitive nature of using computers, being beholden to technology. Like I get it. I like the character of the computer. The design is really effective and really creepy.
A very clever boy.
Yeah. It's a really interestingly designed character. However, I just think it goes on a little too long. And I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as funny as I think so far. I definitely liked the third one probably the most so far. I think it had some of the funnier gags and the funnier bits. I think the second one
being the longest.
Yeah. But it does. What's weird is because of the way they did the first one, where they have the narrative kind of wrap around, where they have it opening with them having the picnic, and then it closes with kind of concluding that the picnic that they're having and all that, like it works because there's a minor narrative hook. In this one, it's like, we're looking for what's the tallest thing. And then it's like, we jump right into it. And I think the one of the more effective things about this, episode, I guess if you want to call it that, is the fact that the thumbnail is the globe and they fake you out with the globe at the beginning. I think that was really smart, and that's probably the funniest bit, is that there's just this globe sitting there like
you could ask me. Like, first of all, the globe is in the thumbnail.
Right. It is the picture in the thumbnail. That's your expectation.
So you're already going in thinking that it's all going to be about this globe. And the fact that it's the immediate switch to like from analog to digital, right?
Yeah.
That expectation of, we can learn so much. We have all of these tools already to like, fuck all those tools. You don't need them anymore. I have everything you could ever want, which I think is a really interesting way, to sort of present the internet as a whole. And I'm trying to think, because like I don't obviously watch a lot of children's programming now. I watched it when I was younger before. I mean, like the most like that I saw about computers was like the intro to Dora the Explorer. You remember that?
Well, no, because so that's the thing. I'm, even being 7 years older than you, the stuff that I was watching, like, the Magic School Bus and stuff in the 90s.
Yeah, like there's no computers.
If there
was,
it was like
school bus.
Well, and if there were computers, it was like the absolute most, cutting edge for the 90s, which is
right.
Dial up, for fuck's sake. If anybody listening to this remembers, I'm sure plenty of you are my age and do remember, but it's interesting. I had not thought about how to kids shows like say Sesame Street or or its ilk, because that's clearly what this is aping. I don't know how they approach technology or having that conversation with kids. I mean, what's weird is, if you go and talk to, if you have friends that have kids, I don't know if you do. I have some.
I do not. Not yet. I'm sure it'll happen sooner than later.
All your stupid friends haven't had stupid kids yet. So, okay.
No, none of my stupid friends are having stupid children.
Not yet. Being
actually, there might be one, but I haven't talked to her in a while.
But like there's none of that technology conversation seems to be more tied to like a that specific person. Like that person's going to have their own interpretation, beliefs, ideas on how themselves and how they use technology and how they want their kids to use technology. And so I think it's interesting because like you said, I didn't grow up in a time when that was a thing that kids shows could even have a conversation about. Like, don't talk to people on the internet. That was not a fucking thing when I was 2 or 3.
Same.
That was 92, even for you in like the late 90s, early 2000s, not a thing. So
the first thing that I used a computer for was to play like the point and click, like Jumpstart Rabbit, like game that teaches you, or like a CD-ROM math game, or like a CD-ROM of Dragon Tales. Like that's what I used. That was like my first introduction to computers. Was I would have this like massive box that a CD-ROM would come in, just this like singular CD-ROM.
A bookshelf box is they're called.
Yeah, which looking back, fucking wild. But
I love them. I was at Half Price Books in Dallas last time I was home, and they had a shelf of bookshelf boxed CD-ROMs, and I had to stop myself from buying one just for nostalgia's sake, because I was like, I haven't seen one of these in a long time, and I really haven't seen them in like mint condition, but that was like a whole unlocked memory of those giant boxes.
I do have some of my old CD-ROMs.
That's amazing. But do you have the boxes that they came in? Those giant bookshelf? Those things are like, that's that's like a thing. There. That's not a thing anymore. They don't even, what's wild is if you go to like Target or Walmart, the area where they sell CD-ROMs for computers is effectively now relegated to like crappy slot machine games. Yeah, see that kind of stuff. They sell that in it's wild to me. They don't even sell that kind of stuff anymore.
The shit.
Freddy Fish. Is that what it's called?
Freddy Fish was the shit.
But no, so it's actually funny. Super quick side note. I was, for some reason, it came to mind that I wanted to show my boyfriend one of these old stupid CD-ROM games that I used to play religiously. So the first one, I mean, I held it up to the screen. Obviously, podcasters can't see that, but it's a Miss Spider's Tea Party, and I found a YouTube playthrough of it that was the entire game. Let me just close.
Yeah, I know
the entire game, and guess how long it was?
Like 20 minutes?
Yeah.
That's
Literally.
the crazy
do you
thing.
know how many times I played that game?
Do you know how many times I played Zoombinis and had no idea what I was doing? And now you could play through it in like 20 minutes. It's being a kid and then looking at the things that you looked at when you were a kid and realizing like, oh, okay, there's like nothing to this. It's mind blowing, but it is kind of what this episode is talking about. It's talking about this, the progression of technology continues. And like you said, we have all these tools at our disposal. I mean, we have bookshelves full of books, and I could put it all on my phone. Like you don't need things anymore, but there is something to be said for your connection to the physical world, because I would kind of wager a guess that the later parts of this episode, when the big red character gets sucked in, well, they all get sucked into the computer. At least the duck and yellow guy gets sucked in, and the red guy is still hanging out outside of it. But they ask, like, what if I'm here? How can I be in there? And that is an interesting kind of question to ask, because we're not dealing with that yet. But the idea or the kind of prospect of your consciousness going into the computer and it being in there but not out here is an interesting idea to think about. It opens up, simulation theory and everything else, but
I think it also talks about just like VR in general now. I mean, this came out we had VR 7 years ago. That wasn't anything super cutting edge 7 years ago. I mean, it's interesting. I like the line where it was like, it says something on the lines of like, you're not you is in the real you, but the not you is also in the computer, like something like that.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting the way that they said like the digital you is the not you. And I think that's a really weird way to word it, but it makes a lot of sense.
You hear about it all the time, right? When, someone is a keyboard warrior, right? I mean, it's that idea. It's the idea of, we joke about it all the time. Those, I don't know if you remember them, those, they were in front of DVDs in the mid 2000s. Like, you wouldn't steal a car. You wouldn't steal, a smoothie, but you would steal a DVD. And it's like, okay, I mean, you're drawing false equivocations here, but it's that same thing of like, you're not, you can do all kinds of things on the internet that you would never feel comfortable doing in real life, like going and screaming the N-word on Twitter, or going and calling someone a slur in a video game, or harassing people on Facebook. Like, the likelihood that any of those people would actually do any of those things in real life is a low percentage. There are crazy people out in the world that would do those things, but for the most,
and anonymity.
Right, exactly. You're a keyboard warrior. Your keyboard protects you, your screen protects you from the repercussions of reality. It's when those things kind of, the lines start to get blurred as an issue, but yeah, that the un-you, I it's an interesting way of approaching it, and it's a very simplistic way of approaching it, which, I mean, again, that's what this show is trafficking in, is a more, kid-friendly, quote unquote, way of doing it. But I think the message becomes a lot more sinister the more you dumb it down. The more you water it down, the more sinister it kind of becomes.
That's literally what like all of these are, though.
Right.
And especially, as I was saying, with love, like when it takes this idea of marriage and distills it down to like its core principles of you wait for your special one, you hope your special one will come, and you seal the pact with a ring, and we all pray that, like, I don't know, it was just like that. When you dumb it down like that, like, God, it sounds horrible. It sounds that is a cult. When you say it like that, it sure sounds like a cult.
Well, you take all of the kind of warm and fuzzies out of it, and it feels very, it doesn't feel aggressive, but it feels very kind of aggressively innocuous. It's like, we're not trying to tell you how it is, but like, we're going to tell you how it is. Like, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that the show is like, no, we're going to strip away the pretense, tell you how it is. And in telling you how it is, it seems very, it's very disturbing when they just boil it down to, like you said, we're sealed with a ring, and then it's like the little bee is floating there, and he's lit in a very upsetting way. He's lit to look malicious. And then this episode kind of takes it the next step, where at the end the red guy comes in and he realizes, I guess he's breaking the fourth wall, and he realizes he's in a show, and his head explodes. That's my interpretation of what's going on.
Yeah,
right?
I feel the same way. I feel like there has to be significance in the fact that he was not online, but he was resistant like the whole time, right, where the other two were not. He was resistant. And I think that says something. I think that gets touched on maybe a little later. Of why was he resistant and the others were not. I don't know if
it's the most human looking of all the characters, which I think also has something to do with, I mean, they show at the end a person in a mocap suit, which we know they're not actually doing. It's all for comedic effect. They're not using mocap for any of this, but it's funny that the most human facing or appearing character of the three is the one who's the most resistant to something that so many of us are just, I have my phone sitting next to me. I'm sure your phone's sitting next to you. Like, it's weird. I think about the conversations that I have in text on the phone with people, and it's like, I am conversing with them. Like, I'm conversing with you now, but I am really just conversing with my computer. Like, and there's that shot in this that they show of the red character sitting there at the screen is empty, and he keeps looking at it. And that is a very good representation of how I feel on a weekly basis. Like, I'm sitting here staring into an empty box, and it is showing me stuff, but ultimately it is an empty box. It is a box that I am having things projected on, but there's nothing there. Like, you're not actually here. You're here in as much as my computer is allowing you to be here. But should any of those things that are held together tenuously at best, like if my internet died, there you go. Like, that one thing has to stop working, and none of this exists. It's a sobering thing to think about. And like this show, however you want to call it, show, program, it does a really good job of boiling these ideas down to their base elements. And the base elements are not pleasant to think about. They're really not. Like, that's why we don't think about the base elements the way that the show wants us to. But I think there is something to be said for approaching these things with no pretense and just saying, this is what it is. Look at it, sit with it, interpret it, analyze it how you will. But it's, it is fucked up to just sit and have an online you and a real you. And there may be a huge disconnect between the two, even if you don't realize that there's a huge disconnect. But I would wager most people realize that their online version of themselves is either an extension of themselves or a tacit rebuttal of who they are on a daily basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I also, the symbolism after the whole, digital dancing, where there's so many different versions shown of Duck and Yellow Guy, like throughout this like 3D space. There's like so many different like avatars, I suppose. And I'm wondering if that represents like all the different accounts that you have online, all the different platforms that you might be a part of, all the different ways that you represent yourself online.
I would assume so.
Right?
I mean, well, and again, like you mentioned, I mean, there's Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and that's just talking about social media. I mean, if you play games online, you have an account somewhere that has information tied to it, and it not necessarily does that information commingle, but it all exists separately. Right. But it does make up holistically your online footprint, because so many people probably use the same username several places. So you could be found on your EA account or your FIFA account or your, League of Legends account or your Instagram or your Reddit or your kink.com or your FetLife or whatever the fuck it is. Mm-hmm. It could all be, it all is tied together to you. But if you're using the same thing, it can be even more tied together. But all of those disparate things do create one singular online presence. And it's weird to think about because Jesus, we were talking about this right before we got on. Like, I've had a Gmail account since I was a teenager applying for college. And yet it is essentially the same Gmail account that I used to get into law school, to go and do my master's program, to do this podcast, to do everything. I've used the same email account, but it's still the same email account I created, almost 2 decades ago. But it on its own has evolved into something else. And I think they don't touch on that in this. This is more of a very much pared down discussion about technology's impact, not technology's kind of evolution. But it does, like you said, that whole at the end where it's showing all these different representations of them, or even the fact that it's like online dance. Like that's again, like boiling technology down. Like some people just want it for the entertainment value, and that's it.
Right. Or
fantasy, or, with the Duck character, he's living out fantasies online that he can't live out in reality because he's not that character in real life. I liked this one a lot. I think the discussion we've had about it is more interesting than the episode itself, but that's also because it's kind of a narrow topic, like realistically, like, even if you're talking about it if you're trying to claim this was for younger kids, or you're presenting it in a way for younger kids, like it's more narrow than love or time or creativity. This is a lot more of a specific piece of the pie that we're looking at.
Yeah, not just like this amorphous concept.
Right. Yeah, like love and time are span generations and cultural and dialectical boundaries. This is how Westerners are using technology. Like that really is what this is about, which is fine. I mean, it speaks to you and I. We are Westerners who use technology, but I think the first 3 episodes have a more timeless and kind of overall more appealing to a larger audience, because it is talking about more the human condition more than this one is, which is fine. Not everything has to be heady and expansive in its dialogue. Some things can just be, this is about computers and how we use them. Right.
So we're going to get into number 5. I want you to keep one thing in mind, and that would be Red Guy's head, exploding at the end, and your take on that being like he finds out he's in a show and it's mind-blowing or something like that. So keep that in mind, and let's get into number 5.
So number 5, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 5, 24 million views as of right now. It was released October 14th, 2015. And I forgot to mention the last one, there's always like one byline or one descriptive sentence. This one is, you look to be a bit hungry, ? So I guess you look to be a bit I don't know how you ask that as a question. It's a weird question to ask. You look to be a bit hungry. It's not something you would. Yeah, sure. So
sure.
Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 5. We'll be right back after watching Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 5.
I love this one.
There's a lot going on.
There's so much happening.
So, couple things just right out of the gate that stand out. So now there is a narrative.
Oh yeah.
they essentially introduced the narrative, at the end of the third episode, end of the fourth episode, end of the fourth episode.
End of the fourth episode.
But the narrative is still unclear, obviously. What is going on? So the red guy exploded the last episode. He's not in this episode. It's the yellow man and the yellow guy and the duck having their attention taken away by talking food, who clearly know where the red guy is, or know that there's something going on, or maybe they have no autonomy of their own. That's very clear. Yep. But I guess my question, not really a question, but is there a moment where the red guy shows up and am I hallucinating? That's the giant, or is this it is him.
No, it's him. That is him.
Okay, because I thought I saw him.
Yeah, you could see the big peak in replay.
Right, yeah. So what I can't figure out. Okay, so the red guy shows up. What do you
think is happening? Yeah. What do you think is happening from start to let's just start at the beginning. The setup.
You mean 65 million years ago?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Of course.
What I think is going on is the three characters that we have seen are in some place where they are being reprogrammed or brainwashed or something to the effect of something that happens in the Clockwork Orange, or they're being force-fed these life lessons and tales. And I again, to what end, I don't know, but they keep showing the duck answering a phone, and then he's kind of in this, can only describe it as an operating room where a can of food is eating him, but the can of food is the yellow guy.
Yeah, so that's okay. So let's start there. And I would say that every time that Duck picks up the phone, he is instantly punished, which is why at the end, yellow guy does not pick up the phone. Okay. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that they are obviously, it is showing from Duck's perspective being eaten by yellow guy, and then from yellow guy's perspective of eating Duck, which is really weird. I can't say the purpose of that specifically, but what I love about this one so much is obviously the indoctrination, the life lesson is about what you're supposed to eat to be healthy. Right. And what I love that this portrays so much is that it literally doesn't matter. It changes all the time. There's no consistency. At first they tell you certain, if you eat all white foods, then you're healthy. And then at the end, it's actually don't. And then have yeast, but not too much yeast. And it's as somebody who's, struggled with weight, I think you could also probably relate to this, being told what you're supposed to eat, when you're supposed to eat it, and what's healthy. And then it turns around and says, actually, that's not healthy. It really hammers home that the fucking food shape gets me every time.
Well, I think what's funny is, like you said, it does kind of speak to again, very, at least my perception is, it's a very Western idea of you gotta be skinny to be beautiful or healthy or whatever the hell messaging you want to go with. Look, as someone who has spent the last 6 months working out essentially every day, I've seen the quality of my life increase, at least from a healthiness standpoint, because I've done that. But that's me doing the same thing every day, which is 30 minutes of cardio. The eating stuff, that is what this is talking about. And it is 100% a blind maze that you're fumbling around in, because we have, you and I, since we've existed on this planet, have seen how many fad diets: Atkins, keto. What's the other one? What's the caveman or paleo?
Yeah.
It's fuck all of these. Take it from me, which I'm not an expert, but I'm not sure those people are. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And having self-control is the biggest, self-control is all a diet is. That's all it is. It's just having self-control and knowing that if I eat an entire bag of Cheetos, it's not good for me. Duh.
Right.
But I don't have to be a doctor to tell you that. Like you eat too much of one thing, it's not good for you. You got to have a balanced diet, a balance of things. You got to, and like that's all it is. But then you get all the noise on the line, Atkins, low carb, whatever the fuck. And that I do like that aspect of this, where it's like it is impossible to navigate, and it is contradictory a lot of the times. Because it's like, well, Atkins is the right one, low carb. And then what is it? Is it paleo or keto, where it's like, eat all the fucking carbs you want. It doesn't matter. Just don't eat this. And it's like, oh my God, like who's right? Who's wrong? Nobody's right is what it feels like. Everybody's just throwing a dart at the board and seeing if it sticks.
And so I think what this is presenting, I mean, like you remember being like when you were in school, like in elementary school, like maybe like even junior high, like where they're showing, like they handed out like in health classes, like all of those.
Food pyramid.
Yeah, the food pyramid. It's all about the food pyramid. The basis of a healthy diet is carbs. And then obviously like keto comes out like a decade later and they're like, actually carbs are the worst thing for you. And it's like that back and forth, that yo-yoing is confusing and disorienting to a child. It's disorienting to an adult.
Right.
Like, and so I think they're obviously playing on that. But the question is, I would consider this one the most unhinged as of yet in terms of consistency. This is the least consistent lesson we've been fed so far. Totally intended. I take full credit.
You should.
I do. But it's interesting because
I agree.
Red Guy is not there. And it starts to make you wonder, did he anchor this show? I say in loose air quotes. Is he the anchor of this show being cohesive?
Grounded in reality, or more grounded?
So, I mean, obviously...
And is it a coincidence that he's a human, the most human front-facing character? I don't know.
I don't know. What do you think of the last scene where he was obviously the one calling?
Right.
He was walking across the screen. There's a telephone booth in the very near background, and he's dressed in, casual outdoors wear.
Human clothes.
Like human clothes, like a trench coat and a scarf. What does that mean? Especially after you saw, his mind explode in the last one. Like, that's the one thing that I'm struggling is the connection between those two events. What was the revelation that because obviously I think we can all agree that having his head explode is very much like his mind was blown.
Right.
That denotes a revelation of sorts. What was that revelation? Well,
that's the last episode and the whole like, you and the computer, you outside of the computer. We didn't kind of mention the idea of it extending to you on the show of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And you in whatever the base reality in this universe is. I don't know who, what, why, for what reason these three characters are stuck being indoctrinated. Because again, we as the audience are along for the ride with them in the indoctrination ride. Because this is now indoctrination lesson number 5 that we've seen with this show. I don't know to what end it's going on, but my perception of what's going on is they're not in the base reality of this universe. There is a further reality that exists deeper than the one that they're in. And the Red Guy was able to, however he did it, reject the indoctrination of technology in the last episode. And in doing so, he was able to see the strings, or see the curtain, as it were, of what play, what stage, what act he's part of. And he was able to, in doing so, I don't like this term, but I think it's the only term that's applicable. I'm not sure it was being used en masse in 2015. It's being used now. He was red pilled, essentially.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
He woke up. That idea.
To what, from what, I don't know.
Becoming aware of the broader lens.
Right.
He
even says it in the last episode. He's like, well, we already have the stuff to answer this. But then it's like, never mind. Like they kind of just ignore it and keep going. But, or was that him that said that? One of the characters. Okay.
Yeah, that was him. He was the contrarian in the entire 4th episode.
So the contrarian gets taken out of the equation, which in and of itself has a lot of interesting ramifications and a lot of things that we could talk about if we were that kind of show about, taking the instigator out of the group and seeing if the group is able to exist without the instigator, able to exist without someone who's kind of keeping them grounded or keeping them level-headed. So like you mentioned, we're kind of seeing a de-evolution of the characters or a maybe weakening of their ability to stand on their own and be grounded. But again, they weren't grounded if this is not the base reality anyways.
Right. I will say that it's interesting that Duck at one point also tries to reject. I mean, so he was the contrarian in this episode. And he at one point is like, I don't want to do this anymore. And you kind of like see like the camera shift. And I think there might even be a sound associated with that as well. Like it's very clearly that he's pushing past like somebody holding a camera.
Right. Yeah, which is the most replayed scene in this episode. And this is the moment that you were talking about where he rejects the indoctrination, tries to leave, and then we see the red guy. And I guess the question that I have is the red guy the one holding the camera?
I want to say in this scenario, no. I don't think it was that the red guy was holding the camera, but I think it was supposed to show that he's still a presence. He's still, it's not that he's completely gone. Obviously like they show like remnants of him throughout the show. They can't remove him all the way from the show. So they show like the picture on the fridge where, in the first shot, he's sitting at the table with the other two. And then he's behind the window when they cut back to it. But then there's this like family-esque portrait in the background with all three of them. Like they're not going out of their way to completely remove his existence. But at the same time, they're trying to cover up any further interference.
Right.
And so even you're like rewatching some parts of it that
this part right here.
Yeah,
it's literally the character on a plate. It's red spaghetti with two eyes. And that's gotta be the red guy character.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the same color. So okay.
I see one more thing. Hold on.
Yeah.
There are two characters eating duck because there's that one and then that character moves off and another one moves in and it's I never know. I didn't notice that, but then they showed that duck is dead meat. Which
yes,
yeah, and then it shows him at the end, yellow guy, all fat from having eaten him, and he's just looking around solemnly. I don't know.
I think he's horrified. I don't think he realized what he was doing. I mean, it cut to it, so I think he didn't even realize what he was doing. I don't think he was aware that he had been eating duck.
Right.
Like he is actually eating duck. I think he is just accepting that this is his reality. I think it's very clearly showing that he's not going to be contrarian no matter what they put him through, at least in this episode.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, by the end of it, he has disemboweled and eaten pieces of, I mean, there's gore and viscera all on the table, and he's sitting in the center of the table, like at the Last Supper, just like looking around with like cans of duck meat, I guess.
I mean, it has Duck's face all over there, so that tracks.
I don't know. Again, this, like you mentioned, this is the first episode that feels like the point is not to talk about the message that they're saying. It's more to kind of advance the story. Or the narrative. I will say I like the standing rib roast. Or the ribeye, the ribeye suit is pretty great. I do like how they keep doing this thing with the eyes, where certain characters' eyes are level, and then other characters that are kind of a little bit more demented, a little bit more sinister. They have eyes, on like a tilt. So
one other thing that I do like about this one is how stupid the song is meant to sound. Like whenever they're met with like Duck saying like that's not how that works, they just go do like they just like go over him, like try to.
Well, it's that like, it's the stick your fingers in your ears mentality and just, la 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 la. Again, it's almost like the show is fighting back against the characters.
Yeah.
The characters are trying to escape the indoctrination. The show is like, no. You're in a show. You're in our show. You're going to learn what you need to. And if you don't, there will be consequences, like being eaten alive, maybe even that, it's not clear how Duck dies, if Duck is dead, if that's going to stand. I don't know. You do, but I don't know where this goes in the next episode, but for all intents and purposes, 2 of the main characters in a 3-character show are dead or gone in
Somehow.
some substantive fashion. They're no longer a part of this. They're still there, but they're not the focus. So what's interesting is I was expecting them to introduce a narrative. I guess they kind of have been, but I was expecting it to be kind of more I was expecting it to be peppered in more throughout. So maybe like in the second episode a little bit, in the third episode, they kind of really backloaded it.
And I would say, I think the reason is because they really wanted to set the stage. I don't think they wanted to introduce narrative before they were able to fully showcase what this world is supposed to be.
Right.
Because I think in that case, it's sort of what this does is shift the focus of the meaning of the message,
right? Where
again, the first message that I think that they really want to get across is how fucked up children's media can be.
Yeah. And
I mean,
again,
that's what the first like 3 episodes really hammer home is this is what we're basically telling our kids. And now, and then in the 4th one, it can obviously that, continues, but that's when they start to show the narrative. And then the focus is less and less on the songs, on the quality of the message,
right.
Or the cohesiveness of the message. And now they're putting in more of the narrative to slowly show how this breaks down over time.
Right.
Like it was stable for a little while.
It's stable as much as they were buying into it.
So I think you're going to find episode 6 very fascinating.
I am excited to watch the last episode only because it's clearly going to have a large portion of it is going to be narrative based, obviously, because there are questions and things that I'm sure they're going to answer and or present answers to. So I'm looking forward to it. I think to bring it around on this final episode or the second to last episode, I think the message is interesting. I think it's funny that they're kind of poking fun at our society's inability to know what is and isn't healthy because the messaging is really hard to sort out. I mean, go on CNN, go on anything and read, and you will find even right now, while there's plenty of crazy things happening in our world, there are still people worried about, what greens should I eat and what greens are healthy and what aren't. It's like, oh my fucking God. Like probably not the most important thing in the world. Maybe go talk to someone who's a professional. Stop getting your news from CNN. If you want to find out what's right for you to eat, I'm going to say this, go to a dietitian, go to a nutritionalist who knows how to do this professionally that will help you professionally. Don't even take my advice. All I do is cardio. I have changed my diet, but I've changed my diet for other reasons because I did go to a doctor for other stuff, not because I wanted to get, eat healthier. I eat healthier now because otherwise I actually feel like shit every day.
Yeah. And that's definitely, that tracks. I also think that it's so different for everybody,
right?
Depending on your genetics, sometimes even if you have like underlying health conditions, like which
you may not even know about. Like
there are certain diets that will either hinder or support your goals. And I think like this blatant, like blanket messaging of this is how it should be for everybody is inherently false. Even if it is true for some people, it can't be true for everybody, which is why they keep, again, and to bring it back to this, to Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, that's why they keep backtracking.
Well, and this, what's really I appreciate about this show is that this show is really about being an individual in a society where you are told to conform to what everybody else's expectations are. I was thinking about this the other day.
Yeah, we really live in a society.
It should be less about me fitting Emma into a square hole and the world at large allowing Emma to be Emma and the world adapting to you, not the other way around.
Agreed.
And that's the message here, obviously, is don't try to force yourself into a box. Let the box exist around you, or don't even be in a box, but make the world around you work for you. Don't work for the world, because you still have to live with yourself at the end of the day. You are still you at the end of the day. Yeah. And
completely agree.
But that's a message that is only now catching mainstream appeal. I mean, it's, people like me and you, people our age have really, and, people the generation older than us have embraced it. But there are so many people in our society who will, who have gone and died, who were gay, who were non-binary, who were all kinds of stuff. And they were never able to be themselves outwardly because of society telling them they couldn't. And this show, as kind of fucked up and weird as the message is, it's really preaching, be yourself, even in the face of a ribeye dancing and telling you to eat white sauce all the time. But not too much, because if you do, you'll get gray teeth. That's my favorite thing. It's like, you can eat all this, but just don't eat too much of it. And it's like, fuck you then? Like, I don't understand any of this. Oh, you're saying if I eat bags of candy all the time, I will just be eating bags of candy all the time. Well, yeah, essentially. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's all this is. Like, well, if you just do this all the time, you will just be doing that all the time. But it might help in the long run. It's like, or you could not just do that one thing. Do more. You got to be balanced. You got to be an individual.
All right.
How
are we doing on time?
We're good.
Okay.
We're coming to the end here. If we go over a little bit, it's fine. I understand that we need to finish this properly and not half-ass it, because we're getting towards the end. So Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 6, 27 million views, was released June 19th, 2016, and the description is, looks like someone's having a bad dream ? They keep asking questions in a very strange way. I noticed in the last episode that the question in the description was asked by the singing spinach can. Are they hungry? Like, oh yeah, but not for you. So I'm assuming this will come up here. Maybe. Okay. I can already imagine where this is going with a description like that. But let's watch Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 6. Is this the final one?
Of the YouTube series? Yes. There are like 2 30-second clips that they have after this. I'm going to look into those in my own time and see if I think that's worth us going over.
They're only 30 seconds. If they have zero value, I don't know. I could spare 30 seconds to find out if something's terrible. All right, here we go. Don't Hug Me. And this is the longest one. This one is 8 minutes long. Yep. So here we go. We'll be right back after watching the final episode of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared on YouTube.
Oh, not good.
All the red guys. Oh my God. Obviously, they're supposed to represent people. Right. And I love their deadpan. I love it so much. It hits for me. I don't know if it hits for you, but it hits for me.
Well, again, like the show, this episode, the final episode of these on YouTube, it kind of goes where I was expecting.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So, what was your hypothesis?
My expectation was that the red character was somehow the main character, the base character somehow, because they showed him at the end of the last one kind of walking out in a world. So it's clear that there was something else outside of this. I didn't expect it that there was, a society of red people.
I think they're just supposed to represent people. This is their representation of people. Humans.
Right. And I was wondering that in the last episode, if the red character was kind of the audience stand-in or the audience analog for, because again, they do that we do that all the time in media where it's like in the original Hellboy, you have the character of the agent who goes out with them and he's us and he's just as freaked out as the rest of us. The red character in this, he's not freaked out throughout all the episodes. I mean, he really only starts to kind of get freaked out in episode 4, the first one that we watched, where he dies at the end. But I mean, it's a pretty quick turnaround for him to go from like, well, I'm on board with this to like, whatever the fuck this is, I don't want any part of it. But I guess my interpretation of what happened in this is, I guess all of this is in his head and he's That's what I don't know, because again, it shows Duck and Yellow Guy as puppets on his hands, and then at some point all of the stage drops away and he's in, again, the show, it wears its inspiration on its sleeve. It's in the White Lodge from Twin Peaks. I mean, that floor is the same white and black checkerboard, which is supposed to be like at least in that show, it's like an in-between place. It's kind of like purgatory. It exists outside of our reality. So I guess maybe he retreats. Does he retreat? He retreats back into himself when...
Well, I think it's important to establish a timeline, which I wasn't thinking about when I watched this. Like, I've seen this a couple of times, obviously, like not just the one time I watched it, when it first came out. I watched it a couple times. And I think it's important to establish a timeline. I think the first thing that ever happens is that office scene. Ever. In like this entire timeline of the entire show, it was the office scene where he is thinking about like, oh, wouldn't this be so interesting and different and fun if this file just was alive and got up and danced? Wouldn't that be great? And everybody obviously immediately told him that's a really stupid, dumb idea, which I feel like you would probably be met with if you're in such a stifling environment and you tried to bring creativity into
or a childlike sense of wonder, because again,
immediately shut down by the adults in the world. Yes,
right, because he's like, wouldn't it be fun if we could learn about files with a fun song? And it's like, if you went and pitched that in an office, they would be like, no, it would not be fun. Now just fucking file them and let's move on. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Is that really what you want to be wasting our resources on?
Right.
Like,
well, and again, that inherently speaks directly to the individual versus the collective, because everybody looks the same outside of the clothes that they're wearing. Everybody is acting the same, even with the clothes that they're wearing. Aside from our main red guy, who, even though that's what he's been referred to this entire time, there are other characters with name tags that say, I am red guy. So again, it's further just kind of reinforcing this idea of being part of society, but still being an individual in the collective, as opposed to just being part of the collective. Because you see in the bar scene, all these other characters that are all just seemingly going through the motions, that are all acting very rote and very the same. And you see this one character go stand on stage naked, removing all pretenses and performing. Yeah, I guess, interestingly, chronologically, that makes
that it would
sense.
happen first. So in my opinion, well, obviously taking off his clothes is vulnerability. That's just a metaphor of vulnerability.
Well, and again, rejecting the collective, because everybody else is wearing clothes. I mean, again, if you went outside right now naked and walked around, you would get arrested, because people are like, well, that's not what you do in polite society. Everybody wears clothes. I mean, again, the fact that a guy can walk around without his shirt on and nobody bats an eye is one thing. A woman can't walk around without her shirt on and everybody goes ape shit. Hashtag free the nipple. Hashtag save the nipple. Hashtag that shit's all insane to me. But it's this idea of what society tells you is okay or not, should not, in a lot of ways, should not dictate your actions within society, as long as you're not breaking any kind of like tacitly understood rules, like don't steal, don't murder, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate that this show really has been about the individual versus the collective, which I think now more than ever is an important discussion to have with people, and an important discussion to have with one another.
Right. Okay. So we've established that part in the timeline. So he goes up on the stage and he presents, I would even say that it's a pitch, in a sense, trying to get like hot or cold, like, is this any good? Would anybody like this? Would anybody watch this? Like, I'm just going to go out there. I'm just going to throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And so obviously everybody's going, boo, this is really bad, which I love. I love the deadpan delivery. But who in the back winds up showcasing themselves? A character that we saw, I think, in the second episode, who canonically goes by the name of Roy. So in the second episode, he is presented as Yellow Guy's dad.
That was my dad is a computer.
Yeah, that's who he was introduced as. And so something that I hadn't noticed that you actually pointed out is that at the end of most of the, like, I think at least the first 4 episodes, it says like special thanks to Roy. And I think what this is trying to say is that Roy saw this performance and said, yeah, let's make a show about this. He saw the opportunity and he said, let's do it. And then I think what had happened from there is now post Roy being like, all right, I'm going to produce this show with you. That is when episodes like 1 through 4 happen. So he took Red Guy's initial idea, and that was episode 1, like, let's think creatively. But as you could see, that there was corruption behind it, and that just slowly got worse and worse over time. And so this original idea that he had was slowly being morphed by the producer, by the company producing this show. So it was all his original creative, vision that was then taken and morphed. And slowly he started to reject all of the changes that were being made by the production. So that's when, obviously, so when his mind is being blown, I think, I'm not entirely sure if that represents like him finally deciding to leave, like this isn't worth it anymore. And then obviously I think like Yellow Guy and Duck are supposed to be actors in this. I think that's really what it is that they're just actors that are also being manipulated by the company, that are probably I can only assume they're probably not getting paid well. Like that's why Duck is like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is stupid. I don't want to be a part of this. They're abusing them. They're punishing them. I'm sure that that's a metaphor for something. It looks like you want to interject. Say a thing.
Well, I don't. I guess when that scene where he goes into the computer and then he walks through that door and he sees a version of Yellow Guy that's just like a blow up puppet, and Duck is just CGI, right? Yep. I didn't take any of this literally, but I guess I should have. It's a kid show because it's literally a kid show.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me ask you something. Because I'm sure that this is a thing, so maybe I shouldn't even ask. Is this answered anywhere, or is this all conjecture?
This is all conjecture. As far as I know, the creators have not come out and confirmed anything.
Interesting. I like that.
Same. I think it should be up to interpretation.
Well, David Lynch, who clearly inspired the end of this episode with Twin Peaks, has said on multiple occasions, king of making shit that is hard to understand and even harder to wrap your head around and sometimes even harder to interpret. He doesn't go out of his way to tell people, well, this is what I meant by this. Because when you do that, you strip away what that person was thinking and you replace what their thoughts were with your own. Again, individual versus the collective.
Right. So yeah, no, I
don't like JD Salinger, but he maybe had a point with Catcher in the Rye of never wanting it to be cast with other people because it does destroy your interpretation of something and replaces it with somebody else's interpretation of it. I would say that you could still have your own interpretation of something without another thing modifying it. But again, you as the individual versus being a part of the collective or the part of, a group or whatever it is. I like that is still clearly, even now in the final episode of this on YouTube, it's still the point. Be yourself, even in the face of being booed, even in the face of being yelled at, being chastised for it. Be yourself, because being yourself is the only thing that matters at the end of the day, frankly, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So, okay, moving forward in the timeline, because we're basically at the end here. So I think when you're in that, like the mind palace checkerboard floor room that you were talking about.
The White Lodge, as they would call it in Twin Peaks.
I think the idea of seeing this like control panel that goes back and forth between all of like the lessons, right, that they're trying to show, ones that we haven't even seen yet, and how just unhinged and how it's upsetting Yellow Guy, who I think is supposed to be the child stand-in, the child audience stand-in, the one that children are supposed to relate to, and how children are not enjoying this, how children don't think that this is good, but they don't have.
I don't want to know what dreams are. I don't want you to tell me what dreams are.
Like they don't even want to be watching it anymore. And right. Red Guy sees this and he's trying to do what he can. And then Roy stretches his long yellow arm and tries to like like hold him, I don't want to say hold him back, but like, hey, like we're in this together, like, hey, like remember why we did this, or something. Like I don't know exactly what but this like presence, this very ominous presence to reinstate his hand in this process. And then what does Red Guy eventually do? He decides to pull the plug on the show and reboot it without Roy at a lower budget, which is why there's less things in the room.
And everything looks lower budget.
Yep. And the date finally changes. So it was June 19th, the entire series, and now it's June 20th, supposed to show, obviously, like we're now moving forward. Now is a new age. Now, I don't know if, the notepad at the end is supposed to be like oh God, no, it's all just going to happen again, no matter what we do. Or is it supposed to be like, no, it's all, that was his original idea. Now he could have it the way that he wanted it. So I don't know. I feel like it could go either way there. And I feel like that could potentially be answered in the TV series that they've created. I don't know. We haven't watched it yet. I'm really curious to see where it goes. Does it continue world building? Like, does it go back to like what the first few episodes were? Like, 1 through 4? Like, does the show continue to echo that for a while and then again pepper in the narrative later on? Or does it immediately go to, no, we're in the narrative now, let's expand on everything that you've seen so far? Or is it something else completely different? I don't know. So it could be this show. It could be his rebooted show. I don't know. But that, in my opinion, is what they were going for. What do you think?
No, I can actually see exactly where you're going with your kind of analysis and take on this. I would have to sit with this for a while. I will tell you that your explanation makes sense with everything. Again, it's like anything else. I know I'm a huge fan of, speaking of things that are kind of left open-ended and without explanation, Sopranos. It's been over now for over a decade. So if you don't know what the ending is, it's left rather wide open. People got really angry about it. At the end of it, they were like, did my TV die? I don't know. Did I lose signal? It just cut to black. But again, it kind of speaks to the same thing that this does, which is I don't necessarily need you to give me everything laid out 1 + 2 + 3 + 4. Sometimes you can just give me some numbers or give me some letters and expect that I, as an audience member, am not learned enough, but able to come to a conclusion on my own. And with something like this, like The Sopranos, like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, like movies, like television, like anything that anybody makes with a purpose, just because they don't tell you doesn't mean they're not trying to tell you something. Just because it's not there explicitly doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that your interpretation is, again, right or wrong. Also, right or wrong doesn't matter. I think it's a valid interpretation and one that kind of makes sense. Again, where it goes from here, I do not know, but
I'm very curious to see where it does go from here. What I will say is that, so what I posited is a relatively widely known theory. I can't say I came up with it 110% on my own.
But even if you didn't, just watch
but that's not putting it down. What I'm
sure, but even then, like it's still, I think it's pretty on point.
Yeah. So, this is what the community is. Basically, what I presented is what the community, for the most part, interprets this series as, up until, again, that does not include anything with the TV series.
Right.
That was just, the end of episode 6. What does this all potentially mean? And going off of what you said, I feel like hand feeding us the answer defeats the purpose. Right. I don't think it's necessarily supposed to be like, it could mean anything and you should put your own spin on. I think what they're trying to do is encourage you to come to your own conclusion, because if you're not, I don't want to say if you're not able to figure this out on your own or to understand this or wrap your head around this on your own, then you've missed the point.
Because it can be enjoyed without it. It can be enjoyed sans point. Well, and I think that for me is the important thing about something like this. Yes, there is clearly an intent behind the filmmakers, because that's what they are. The filmmakers, the creators have an intent with what they're doing, but it is very entertaining and really well done. The production values at this point are beyond impressive. It is
yeah.
a show that is worth watching, even if you don't want to dig into the quote lore of the show or the mythology of the show. Because that, I mean, you know, that's the question, and that's my concern here. And that's kind of the concern even with this episode is the first 3 episodes were fun. They were a lark. They were a proof of concept, right?
Yep.
Then you have 4 and 5 and 6, which all of a sudden are like, no, you don't understand. There's so much more going on. Even if you don't understand it, even if you don't know, even if we're not telling you, there's a lot more going on. I always worry that something like this, because I've seen plenty of other things similar to this, will start to falter, fall apart, and crumble under the weight of its own high concept narrative, which this is a high concept narrative now at this point. It's trying to do more than just hell funny, send ups of kids TV with weird ass puppets. They're trying to do more. They're trying to introduce a society and a character and an idea and all these things. And I'm concerned that it will not be able to stand up to this. And this is pretty perfect. I mean, there's 6 of these. Like, let me ask you, do we need
anything
else?
Do we need more?
No,
So
I personally don't.
Okay, so this is how I see it. Obviously, going into it without knowing what the more is, I kind of see the more going in one of 2 directions. I guess it could potentially be both of these, but I either see the TV series as being more episodes, these in-between episodes of what this kid show was. Like, again, like reminiscent of those first 3. So I can sort of see it being like, these were all the ideas that we didn't have the time to, or the budget to expand on. These were the other lessons that we wanted to show. These were the other commentaries that we wanted to make on children's media, portrayed in this like episodic, Sesame Street-esque Avenue Q style. Or I guess, it could potentially be everything that led up to this. Like, I could see it being the interpersonal relationship between the 3 main characters outside of the show. I could see it like the backstory, the behind the scenes almost. I could see it going in one of those 2 ways. I don't see necessarily a purpose behind the second one. I kind of am hoping that it's the first, unless if they have a even cooler idea that I can't even think of right now. But what's your prediction?
Well, and that's, I mean, again, I think to your point, like I think that's the logical place to end this second episode of SurrealTube is, holistically, what was this? What does it mean? And now to answer the question, because I think we've answered those 2, where is it going or what do we want it to go to? And to address your question, I don't need more. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, again, right now with the way this ends.
I'm so curious.
Right. No, I'm with you. The way this ends, you have these characters going, okay, one character essentially taking it upon himself or herself or themselves to pull the plug, restart, reset, start anew. But ultimately, you have created and caused and been part of. Clearly, you're going down the same path you've already gone down. You have begun the process anew, but yet somehow the process, that's the thing. Anytime you start a podcast, anytime you start a painting, anytime you start a movie, at the core, it might be different, but the process is still the same. And so I don't know if it's commenting on that, but by the end of this, they're right back at square one. This ends the way that it started. Are the colors different? Sure. The notebook is still the same, but the character colors are different, but the notebook is still the same. It's the same notebook from the first episode that we see while they're sitting there at the table. For me, what would I predict? I predict it's probably going to be more of what we saw in the first 3 episodes, with some of what's been thrown in 4, 5, and 6 in there to kind of just keep the audience interested and keep the people who are here for the mythology that they're now invested in, give them something to chew on. I don't need that. Again, I mean, the mythology is interesting. I think this is a fun universe and world to be kind of invested in and to be a part of as an audience member. But for me, these 6 episodes stand as pretty well done, well made, very subversive, but yet introspective content that I will be telling more people about. I hope people that listen to this, that have followed along with us, are getting the same feeling that I am, which is this is really interesting and well done. But for me personally, I don't know if I need anything else. I would like more of what they've given us in 1, 2, and 3, less of 4, 5, and 6, only because as someone who watches a lot of movie and a lot of TV, like a lot of people do, most people just don't sit and talk about it on podcasting, on recording. I can't help but, understand why people want more. Of course you want more. You liked it. You want more. Yeah. But more isn't always better. Back to the healthy episode where it's like, you could eat bags of Cheetos all day and you'll probably lose weight by doing so, but you'll be massively unhealthy. That's because you can't just do one thing. And my concern is by them doing more myth arc stuff and mythology and lore, it will start to erode the foundation that they built up with those first 3 episodes and create something that becomes just kind of narratively and tonally disjointed. And that happens all the time because at some point you realize, well, we have wandered into a corner and how do we get out of it? I don't know. So instead of going left or right, we try to climb up the wall. And it's like, well, you could have gone left or right, cut your losses, and pivot, or just keep going forward and try to climb up the wall. And a lot of things fail to really make good on their high concept premises. I don't know where this goes. I'm not surprised that there's more of this, given that between the 6 videos, they have like almost 300 plus million views, and somebody's watching, somebody's listening. There are tastemakers on the internet who are sitting with their finger on the pulse of this kind of stuff all the time. But personally, I don't know if I need any more. Would I be interested to see more? Am I going to watch more with you? Yes, to both of those. But as for me needing more, the way this ends, my reaction, I think, is a perfect reaction. Oh no. And that's it. Yeah. Like, I would be okay with it ending.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't need to be more. I agree. But what I will
just go watch the beginning again, because it's very clear that that's what's happening. It's cyclical. It's a cycle.
I do think that there's a possibility that that like cynicism that you have of what this could potentially turn into by it being too much. I want to believe that these creators are smarter than to fall into the same pitfall that they're warning against.
I agree.
That's what I really want to believe. I want to believe that these are incredibly smart, intelligent people that have a lot of stories to tell. And it's not just that they're doing it for the same corporate greed that they are potentially showcasing, especially in this episode 6, because that's what it really feels like. It's shilling out to a corporation. It's shilling out to a production company, a network. I don't want to think that that's exactly what they wound up doing. I guess it would be painfully ironic if that's what they wound up doing.
Well, it wouldn't be the first, last, or only people to do it either. So,
but I'm really hopeful that they're different. I haven't seen anything negative about it online. I'm trying not to seek out anything, but I haven't seen anything specifically like, don't watch this. It's not as good as you think it's going to be. Like, I haven't seen anything like that, but then again, I'm not seeking it out, so I don't know. But I would be really disappointed if they wound up falling into the same pitfall that they're warning about. That would make me really sad.
It would make me laugh in a sadly ironic way. But I don't personally see a lot of what content creators do when they work with bigger production companies and stuff as selling out. I see it as buying in, only because like, it's hard to take it from me, someone who does this almost by myself, aside from the people that I work with, like you. It's still me ultimately at the end of the day. And it's not easy to do this by yourself. If someone came to me tomorrow and said, hey, $200,000, you want to work for us or work with us? Like, I would be selling out, but at the same time, I'm just buying in.
Oh, no. And I'm not talking about greed
I know
in that way. I think it's more
but like that is what we're talking about here, is like what happens when someone creates something so popular and somebody comes to them and says, can we make more of this? Do you say, no, I've told enough and that's all I'm going to tell? Or do you say, I could crank out a couple more stories?
I guess what this series could potentially be warning about more so, it's like, it's more than that. It's not just, Red Guy relying on Roy to help him make this show. It's warning about the fact that Roy very clearly has had a negative impact on the show. And I don't want to say that Red Guy allowed him to do it, but he was rather complicit until episode 4. And so I think that's sort of what I can, when I say like, I hope they're not just like, I hope they don't fall into the same pitfall. I don't want to say that it's just that they're selling out to a corporation for the sake of making money and that that's inherently a bad thing. My biggest fear is that in doing so, that corporation will have too much of a say on the content, and it destroys what they were trying to do in the first place. It
becomes part of the collective of content as opposed to an individual piece of content that stands out. Again, it would be painfully ironic if the show did that. It would become a cautionary tale, not just in the content that it's presenting, but also what happens to the show.
Unless if that was what they wanted all along.
I mean, they didn't make this show because they didn't want money.
But
we live in society where we have to pay for things, so we can't do anything about it. Yeah.
I will say that I forgot exactly the name of the streaming service. We'll probably talk about it when we go over this next time. But there is like the streaming service that they wound up using, it's not like Netflix or HBO Max or Hulu. Like it's a much, much smaller one that I've never heard of. And so that also makes me think like, well, it's not like they sold out to Netflix. It's not like they sold out to HBO Max, you know?
Maybe HBO Max and Netflix weren't coming calling.
And that's true too. It makes me wonder, like, did they choose a more independent like streaming platform? Or is it that the bigger ones didn't want it? I feel like the bigger ones would be stupid not to, because I feel like they would look at the view count and be like, we want you. We want your view count. We want your viewership. We want your audience. So I feel like it's not that they wouldn't pick it up. I feel like if anything, maybe they even pitched it to these places and they were like, but this is what we would have to do in order to make this work for us. And then they were like, okay, bye.
It's too weird. Here's the thing. This came out in 2016. We're looking at it now, 27 million views 6 years later. I don't know what this had in 2016. I don't know, if you walk into the Netflix office or you walk into HBO Max or wherever and you pitch this idea to the wrong person, they're going to stare at you like you got fucking horns on your head. And they're going to say, not only do I not get it, I don't think our audience is going to get it, and I don't want to put this out. So I don't know. I think it will become painfully apparent when we sit down and watch whatever came after this. If it is the same as what we're seeing now, but better production values, because again, this fucking episode knocks it out of the park with a full animation section, really well done, really crisp, really bright, really well done. It will be interesting to see, because it will become painfully obvious why they made the decision that they made to go where they went. If it's exactly this, it's probably because they wanted to just keep making it the way that they made it. If it's different, it will be, like you said, money or less altruistic reasons. But I will tell you, I immensely appreciated and enjoyed watching these three, and then the previous 3. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I hope they don't gild the lily, as it were, because they don't have to do much more. This was pretty good without anything else. But hey, I know that people want content, need content, are constantly consuming content, and you can only watch these 6 videos so many times. So I get it, but at the same time, I don't need any more. This is really good. And they put a pin in it right in the end. And in my mind, they don't have anything else to say. They probably have more to say, but for me, message received, message interpreted, message analyzed with you, but I don't need any more, but I'm excited to see what that more is.
Yes. So on that note, if anybody in our lovely audience, any of our listeners, have any ideas of whatever content that they found online that they think would fit the series really well, send it our way.
Chris at scarystorieswetell.com. Not social media, not Twitter, none of that. Email it to me. I will read it. Me or Emma will read it. But don't do social media. Really, don't do Twitter, please. Like, can we just leave? Can we just leave that? Can we just leave Twitter now? But I'm with you. Like, I want to know what other people are watching, because there's probably stuff that you haven't seen and I haven't seen.
I mean, obviously we're planning. I think our next series will be Salad Fingers. I feel like that's pretty I feel like that's the next logical place to go. But after that, I'm going to be doing a lot of research to see like what else should we do? What else makes sense? What else haven't you seen that I think you definitely should see? So obviously, if you guys have any ideas as to what those things could be, obviously it doesn't have to be just animation or just like this style of content. It could be, live action. It could be like not necessarily story driven, but whatever surreal content that was made specifically for online that you guys want us to react to, definitely send it our way.
Yeah, I would like to watch something with Emma that Emma has never seen and that I've never seen.
That would be fun.
Because those are reactions. Because you're watching me reacting and I'm reacting, but I would like to watch you react alongside with me genuinely. Because we who knows what people are gonna dig up. But like you said, I'm excited to see Salad Fingers, another thing I've never seen. So
it's a doozy.
Yeah. Well, this set the bar very high in a number of ways, production values alone, but just the quality of the storytelling and the quality of the idea, just all very well done. So again,
it's going to be a jump. I don't want to say a jump in quality or production value, but it is, I mean, it's hard to compare. It's very apples to oranges in terms of like, something that was posted on Newgrounds like a decade and a half ago, like
I remember
further probably.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's where Salad Fingers got its start was Newgrounds. I'll have to do more research just to make sure that I'm not just talking out of my ass. But anyway, I feel like that does it so far for this saga of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I'm curious to see how we're going to wind up tackling the show.
Yeah, me too.
We'll have to brainstorm.
Yeah, we'll have to figure something out because that feels more like a thing that we don't do on this kind of show and more like something I do on other shows that I record. More like, talking about a show as opposed to like watching along. Because 22 minutes that's a full length episode of something. That's, and again, like this episode got there. This episode verged on it. I mean, 10 minutes would be a lot. So yeah, I'm excited to see more of this and more just weird, surreal things on the internet. So until then, Emma, where could people find you on the internet if they were looking for you?
Here, just right here. If you guys are curious about the previous podcast that I made with my bestie Arthur, you can find that on YouTube, Strange Beliefs Podcast. It's also on some other places too, probably. It's been put to rest for quite some time now, but if you are curious to see what other things that I've worked on, Strange Beliefs Podcast, like I said, you can find it easiest on YouTube. That's where I discussed back when I was a total skeptic about everything metaphysical and spiritual. And now I'm a lot more on the fence than I was back then with my friend who is a self-proclaimed witch that I interviewed relentlessly. So if that's something that interests you, definitely go check that out. I would always appreciate an extra view or two on one of those videos. But other than that, you can find me here.
I just want to let you know that is the best outro that you have done, period.
We got there. We did it. It only took like 25 times, but we did it.
You did it. And I you always mention how you're not prepared and how you flub it.
Because I gave up on the whole Twitter plug, Instagram plug.
Don't plug those things. Plug your nose when you talk about Twitter. P.U.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, Twitter is fucking trash. Speaking of where you can find me, you cannot find, well, you could find me on Twitter if you wanted, but you could find everything that I work on at weirdingwaymedia.com. That's the podcast network that we are all a part of. And that is where you are finding this show. You might not be finding it on weirdingwaymedia.com, but it's part of the Weirding Way Media Network. And there are 19 plus shows, 20 plus shows on the network. So go check all of them out. Our friends over at Twisted and Uncorked are there. Emma's podcast is on there, though it is set to private for the time being. But if you wanted to, like you said, go listen to Emma's show on YouTube because that's where you can find it right now. As for the rest of the stuff for this, big thanks as always to Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge for the album artwork for the show, and to our good friend Alex Malnack of Blondo. His band is currently touring the Midwest and also can be found on Spotify. Just search Blondo. As always, big thanks as always to the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared people for creating this content that we so voraciously consumed in 2 sittings.
Oh, yeah.
As if there was so much to consume. It was like less than an hour's worth of stuff. And we'll let our good friend, the former host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out. We'll be right back after watching Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared 5. We'll be right back after watching the final episode of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared on YouTube.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.